Hello everybody, and thank you for joining me, and welcome to today's edition of Daf Yomi. Today we open the book to a truly fascinating page, Menachot 88b. The Mishnah is the puzzle, a riddle presented by the sages. It speaks of the anointing of the various vessels of the temple. We know that from our holy Torah that a talent of gold was used for the menorah, but what about all the other vessels? The Gemara asks, how did a mere half log of anointing oil and a quarter log consecrate to the service of the Kohen God of the high priest find its purpose? The Gemara's intricate dance of question and answer brings forth a stunning resolution. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, our great redactor of the Mishnah, poses the very question that troubles us. For what purpose was a small measure of oil consecrated? The sages offer various answers, and each is challenged and found wanting. Was it for the oil of the sota, the suspected adulteress? No. The Torah tells us that her water is already holy. Was it for the oil of the Todah, the thanksgiving offering? No, its oil is consecrated by the slaughter of the offering itself. And so the Gemara, like the master detective, reveals the truth. The half log of oil was for the menorah, and the quarter log was for the chavitin of the Kohen Gadol, his daily meal offering. The half log was used to measure out the oil for the menorah lamps each morning, and the quarter log for the Kohen Gadol's offering. But why, you ask, must these simple measuring vessels be anointed at all? This is the crux. The ultimate teaching of our daf is a profound principle about the sanctity of the intention and holiness of the mundane. The Gemara concludes by quoting an astonishing verse from Isaiah: Ma'aretz merchak ish atzati, the man of my counsel far from a country. Say it again. The man of my counsel from a far country. This is a tribute, a profound nod to Rabbi Chia, who traveled from Babylon to the land of Israel to teach this very idea to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. It is a powerful mind that wisdom can come from any place, and the simplest of tools can be elevated to the holiest purposes. So let's dive straight in. So the Gemara, finishing off in the last Amud, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was sitting in study and posed a difficulty. For what purpose was the quarter log measuring vessel anointed with the anointing oil, thereby consecrating it as a service vessel? If he suggests it was necessary in order to measure the water used for the purification of a leper, one can counter that the rite is performed outside the temple, so it does not require a service vessel. Chutz, outside. So if you have the Gemara here on page 256, the Stone edition, you have a picture of an area outside the temple called the Eastern Gate and the Gate of Nechano. Chutz, outside. When used in connection to the temple, this term can have any of the several meanings. In this context, when the Gemara refers to a leper coming to the temple on the day of his purification, the word means outside the temple courtyard, on the outside of the outermost eastern gate, opposite the gate of Nechano, when all the rituals of purification for the leper were performed. The rituals needed to be performed outside the temple because the leper remains impure until the rite has been completed, and therefore it's prohibited for him to enter the temple. And if he suggests it's for measuring the oil for the loaves of the Nazarite, one can counter that the loaves of the Nazarite are consecrated through the slaughter of the ram he brings, and there is no need for the oil to have been consecrated through a service vessel. Rabbi Chia said to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the consecration of the quarter log measuring vessel is necessary, and with it one would measure oil for the high priest's griddle cake offering. The 3 log of oil that the high priest brings for his griddle cake offering will be divided into 12 parts, a quarter log of oil for each loaf. This will be done using a quarter log measuring vessel in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Chia. I'm going to say the word here, Hilchot Kliyah Mikdash 117, as a quarter log of oil is used for each and every loaf. In praise for resolving the difficulty, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi read the verse about Rabbi Chia, who traveled from Babylon to join Rabbi Yehuda Nasi in Eretz Yisrael, the man of my counsel from a far country, Isaiah 46:11. The Mishnah teaches what purpose did the half log measuring vessel serve? It was used to measure a half log of water for the sota and a half log of oil for the thanks offering. The Gemara relates, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was sitting in study and posed difficulty. For what purpose was the half log measuring vessel anointed with the anointing oil and by consecrated it as a service vessel? If you suggest it was necessary in order to measure the water used in the rite of the sota, one can counter is that the water that was used non-sacred such that it is necessary to consecrate it. The sota drinks the water outside the confines of the temple itself. Accordingly, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi could have precluded the need for a service vessel to measure it in the same way as he did with regard to the water used for the purification of the leper. Since the rite is performed outside the temple, it should not require a service vessel. In fact, Some manuscripts of the Gemara state that this is what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said. Rabbeinu Gershom Rashi is written, and that the priest shall take holy water in an earthenware vessel. It was 5:17. And if you suggest that it was for measuring the oil for the loaves of a thanks offering, one can counter that the loaves of a thanks offering are consecrated through the slaughter of the thanks offering, and so there's no need for the oil to have been consecrated to a service vessel. Rabbi Shimon, son of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabbi Shimon was the youngest of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's sons. Although he was not appointed to replace his father's Nasi, as that honor was granted to the first son, Rabbi Gamliel, he was nevertheless highly regarded by his father. In fact, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi appointed his son as the Chacham wise man of the court, who was third in leadership after the Nasi and the Abbas. Many sources present Rabbi Shimon as sitting and studying from his father, and it is stated Rabbi Yehuda Nasi taught most of his Torah knowledge to Rabbi Shimon. Before Rabbi Yehuda Nasi died, he requested the presence of his youngest son, and when Rabbi Shimon entered, he passed on hidden wisdom tomb, the tomb at 103b. Although Rabbi Shimon was younger than his father's greatest students, Rabbi and Bar Kapara, it was later that he was the one who taught them the midrash of Torah's Kohanim. Rabbi Shimon studied a great deal of Torah together with Rabbi Chia, and they were also business partners in the silk trade. Rabbi Shimon earned both honor and wealth and was blessed with longevity. His only known descendant is a daughter born during his own father's lifetime. Said to his father, the consecration of a half-log measuring vessel was necessary, with it one would distribute a half-log oil to each and every lamp of the candelabrum. There was a half-log measuring vessel in the temple, which was used for measuring the oil required for each lamp of the candelabrum. This is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. From the Sefer Avodah Mikdash 1:17. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said to his son in praise, "Lamp of Israel, indeed that was its use." Apropos the lamps of the candelabrum, the Gemara refers that Rabbi Yochanan says that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, if there is a lamp whose flame went out, Nehash Chavsa, the only commentary explains that this halacha applies whenever one of the lamps goes out, even during the middle of the night. Rashi and Bein Hagdosh Moragola. Difficult with this is that the priest would enter the sanctuary only twice, toward the evening to kindle the lamps, and then again in the morning to remove the ashes. How then could they change the oil and the wick at any other time to the Yavits? Rashi notes the Gemara here would appear to apply this halacha to all lamps of the candelabrum. Some commentators claim that it is only with regard to the western most lamp that there is a requirement for the lamp to alight continually, and it is to that lamp that the Gemara is referring. If the other lamps went out, there is no requirement to relight them. Responder of the Rashba. Another issue concerning which the commentaries disagree is whether there is a requirement for the lamps to be alight during the day as well. Most commentators assume there is no such requirement, but some go so far as to claim that there is a requirement for all the lamps to be lit throughout the day, and if any of them go out, they should be rekindled. They maintain that the word continually in Exodus 27:20 is written with regard to the candelabrum, refers to all its lamps. Menachot Chinuch, in explanation of the opinion of the Rambam. If a lamp of the candelabrum went out, the priest would remove its wick and the remainder of the oil and clean the lamp before placing a new wick and a new half-log of oil. The old wick and oil were placed to the side of the altar, in the same place of the ashes of the inner altar, the outer altar are put. Priest would then rekindle the lamp. Rambam Sefer Avodah Mikdash 3:12. During the night, the oil in the lamp is halachically rendered as ashes. Nidar shein hashemen. Some commentators explain that even if the oil is still practically suitable for the mitzvah, the halachically is regarded as though it were ashes, and therefore no oil must be used. Rashi remain in this vein. Some manuscripts of the Gemara's text state that the oil is rendered old, even though it is practically suitable. Since it was already used, it may not be relit, and new oil must be supplied. Rambam's commentary on the Mishnah. Alternatively, the intention is that when the wick burns out, it turns to ashes, and those ashes are mixed together with the oil, thereby rendering it unsuitable for the mitzvah. Rashi manuscript. And the wick is rendered as ashes, and they may no longer be used. How should the priest act? He removes the ashes, the oil and wick, from the lamp, and puts new oil and a new wick into it and kindles it. Now the Rika was sitting and studying this halacha and raised his lamp. When a priest puts oil in the lamp, does he fill it with the same quantity of oil that was initially used, i.e. a half log, or does he fill it with an amount equal that what it now lacks in order to replace the oil that was removed? Rabbi Yirmiyah said it is obvious that he fills it with the same quantity of oil that was initially used. When a lamp went out, which required new oil to be placed in a lamp, a full half log of oil was added in the quantity opinion of Rabbi Yirmiyah. And that's the Rambam Sefer Timidi Misafim 3:12. As if he were to fill it with an equal amount of what it now lacks, there would be a difficulty. How do we know how much oil it lacks? And if you would say that the priest calculates using a measuring vessel, one could counter that. If so, there would not be only 7 measuring vessels for liquids. Rather, there would have to be many more measuring vessels of a whole range of volumes. In praise for resolving his difficulty, Rabbi Zerika read the verse about Rabbi Yirmiyah, and in your majesty prosper on behalf of the truth and meekness and righteousness. Psalms 45:5. An Amorite ruling was also taken according to the explanation of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Abahu says, Rabbi Yochanan says, and some say Rabbi Abba says that Rabbi Hanina says that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says, if there is a lamp whose flame went out during the night, the oil in the lamp is rendered as ashes, and the wick is rendered as ashes, and they may no longer be used. How should the priest act? He removes the ashes, the oil and wick from the lamp, and puts into it oil of the same quantity that was initially used with a wick and kindles it. Rav Huna son of Rav Yehuda says that Rav Shesha says each lamp of the candelabrum in the temple was movable, and the branches holding it were thin and flexible, and could therefore be bent over in order to tip out any ashes, remove remaining oil or wicks from the lamps. The basis for his opinion is the verse, and you shall make a candelabrum of pure oil, of beaten wood. The candelabrum shall be made, its base and its shaft, its cups and its knobs and its flowers will be from it. Of a talent of pure gold it shall be made. In Exodus 25:31-39. The Gemara explains that Rav Shesha holds that when it is written and the candelabrum is to be fashioned from a single talent of gold, and that it be beaten into its form, it is written with regard to both the frame of the candelabrum and each of its lamps, i.e., they must all be fashioned together from a single piece of gold beaten in its form. Before the lamps must have been movable, because since it is necessary to remove the ashes from the lamps, were each lamp not movable, it would not be possible to remove the ashes. The Gemara raises an objection to Rav Shesha's opinion from a Baita. How would the priest act when removing the ashes from the lamps? He would remove the lamps from the candelabrum and place them in the tent of meeting, i.e. the sanctuary, and scrub them with a sponge, a bit sphog, sponge from the Greek spongos, meaning sea sponges or multicellular organisms that live in water. The skeletons were used in ancient times for washing and soaking liquids. Even in Greek, this meaning is brought in to include anything similar to a sea sponge due to its softness, flexibility, and ability to soak up water, to remove any remaining oil. And then he would put fresh oil into them and kindle them. Evidently, the lamps and the frame of the candelabrum were separate parts. The Gemara explains that there is a dispute between the Tanaim concerning this issue, and Rav Shesha states his opinion according to the opinion of that Tana. As is taught in the Bible, the rabbis say that when removing the ashes, the priest would not move the lamp from its place, rather he would remove the ashes while the lamp was still attached to the frame. The Gemara raises a difficulty, but from the fact that the Bible states that the priest would not move the lamp from its place, it would appear that one wanted to move it, he was able to move it from its place. Apparently, the lamps were independent parts. The Gemara explains, rather amend the Bible to say the lamp would not move from its place, as the lamps were not independent removable parts, but were formed together with the frame from a single piece of gold. The Gemara asks, and whose opinion is expressed by the rabbis in the Bible? Is the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, as it is taught in another Bible. Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Sadok, says, there was a kind of gold plate, a tas. Apparently from the Persian tas. This word was adopted by various Semitic and European languages, including Latin tassa, and was incorporated rather early on into Hebrew. Some associated with the Greek tasis, which means stretch out, extend, or spread. Accordingly, the word was used to refer to any wide, flat vessel upon which food or other items are placed. For each lamp, which was placed on top of it, and which served as a cover for the lamp. The plate was attached to one side of the lamp, to the lamp's head, and the wick emerged from the other side, from the lamp's mouth. When the priest would come to remove the ashes from the lamp, he would first push up on the part of the plate and the mouth of the lamp, thereby exposing its contents. The lamp would then be bent over and its contents tipped out, and when he would come to place fresh oil and a wick in the lamp, he would place the new wick at its mouth and then push down on the plate at the head of the lamp, thereby closing it. Then he would straighten it up and pour in the oil to the hole in the middle of the plate. The Gemara comments, and whether or not the lamps were independent removable parts is the subject of a dispute between these following Tanaim. As is taught in the Bible, both the frame of the candelabra and its lamps are produced together from the same talent of gold. The tongs, the pans, the vessels that held the oil are not fashioned from the same talent of gold, which candelabra was fashioned according to the opinion of Rabbi Nehemiah. That's the Ram Sefer Hilchot Beit 3:6. But its tongs and pans, which were the implements used for removing the ashes, were not fashioned from the same talent of gold talent. And Nehemiah says only the frame of the candelabra is produced from the talent of gold, but its lamps and its tongues and its pans are not produced from the same talent. Rather, they are formed independently. The lamps are then positioned on the frame, but can still be removed from it. The Gemara asks, with regard to what do these Tanaim disagree? The Gemara explains, they disagree with regard to the exposition of this verse. As it taught in the Bible, from the verse of a talent of pure gold to be fashioned with all those vessels, Exodus 25:39, we learn about the frame of the candelabra produced from the gold talent. The way is derived to include its lamps, that they should also be fashioned together with the frame from the same talent. The verse states, it shall be fashioned with all these vessels. This indicates that not only the frame, but also additional parts should be fashioned from the same talent. If so, one might have thought that I should include even its tongues and pans. To counter this, the verse states, it shall be fashioned. It teaches that only the frame and the lamps are to be fashioned from the gold talent. This is the statement of Nehemiah. The Gemara interrupts the citation of the Baita and notes that the statement of Nehemiah in this Baita, in which he claimed that the lamps were fashioned from a talent with his frame, is difficult, as is contradicted by the statement by Nehemiah in the other Baita, in which he claimed that lamps were independent parts. The Gemara explains, there are two Tanaim, and they disagree with regard to the opinion of Rabbi Nehemiah. The Gemara resumes its citation of the Baita. Rabbi Yeshua ben Kocha says, only the frame of the candelabra were produced from a talent of gold, a kikar. Large measurement in the Bible, a talent is primarily used to measure metals and their monetary value. This term was also used as the name of a weight in other ancient Semitic languages. The Hebrew word kikar probably relates to the round shape of the weight, as kikar is also the word for a loaf of bread. The bread is baked as round loaves. Those disagree about the amount equivalent of the talent, with estimates ranging from 33 to 50 kilograms. From the verses in Exodus 38:24-29, it can be derived that a talent was equivalent to 3,000 biblical shekels of gold, but its tongues and pans and its lamps were not produced from the talent. Rather, how do I realize the meaning of the verse? Of a talent of pure gold, it shall be fashioned with all these vessels. It teaches that only the vessels associated with the candelabra were made of gold, even though they were not fashioned from the same gold talent from which the candelabra and its lamps were. The Gemara questions the need for the derivation of the Baita, but the requirement that the vessels be made of gold is explicitly written in the verse, and you shall fashion lamps 7, and they shall kindle its lamps, and it will enlighten toward its face, and its tongues and its pans shall be of pure gold. It's 25:37-38. Why then is it necessary for the Baita to derive this from the phrase with all these vessels? The Gemara explains that this derivation of the Baita is necessary only to teach that the same applies to the mouth of the lamps, where the wicks rest. Otherwise, it might enter your mind to say that since the mouth of the lamp blackens and is damaged by the burning wick, therefore the principle that the Torah spared the money of the Jewish people should be applied, and consequently let the mouth of the lamps be fashioned from the gold of any quality, not necessarily from pure gold. Therefore, the Bible teaches that even the mouth of the lamp must be fashioned from pure gold. I moved on to the beginning of the next Omid. In conclusion, so my dear friends, the lesson of Menachot 88b is not merely about the function of the temple vessels, it's about elevation of the ordinary. It teaches us that even the smallest vessel used for a holy purpose becomes sanctified. We too are vessels. Our daily acts, no matter how small, and performed with pure intention for the service of the Creator, are elevated to become holy. Just as a simple measuring cup becomes a vessel in the sanctuary, so too we can become vessels for the divine presence in our own lives. May it be best to do so. I wish you all the best, and thanks for listening. Bye.